Hello, my name is Kevin Clay, and I'm going to be leading you on the webinar Introduction to the FMEA, or the Failure Modes and Effects Analysis. The FMEA is the fourth tool in the Six Sigma root cause analysis tool set. A very, very powerful tool that we are going to learn at a high level how to fill out and what the use of this tool is. Our course agenda for today starts out with a brief discussion about who your instructor is, and that would be myself, Kevin Clay. I'm a Master Black Belt, and I am the president and CEO of a firm called Six Sigma Development Solutions. So we'll get more into that in the next slide. We're going to talk about or introduce the failure modes and effects analysis. Again, a very, very powerful tool. If used incorrectly, it could take a very long time to fill out. So when used in the as the fourth in this root cause analysis tool set, it kind of breaks things down to where you're only focused on the key inputs to your process, problem, or opportunity. We'll talk about how to fill out the FMEA, and then we'll in brief talk about how it is very important in this root cause analysis tool set. We'll end the webinar with talk about scheduling a strategy session. We've worked with a lot of people, a lot of organizations to really transform themselves and what they do. But it's got to start somewhere, and a lot of companies and a lot of people don't really understand what the strategy is to get to their goal. And we've been there. We've done this many times. So instead of reinventing the wheel, let us help you to develop that strategy. Who am I? This is a question I think that a lot of my students and my colleague students have when we're teaching them. Who is this person and what gives them the right to educate us on this method or this tool? Well, I'll give you a little background on myself. Number one, well, I am my name's Kevin Clay again. I am a Master Black Belt and a Lean Master Practitioner. I don't really, it's hard for me to say the word master because I don't really think there is one. It's a concept of the more you know, the more you find out that you really don't know. It can be pretty daunting sometimes, but it's very interesting to me, and I think that's how that you reach the pinnacle of a master, is to find out that it's lifelong learning. It's a life of upgrading your skill sets, learning new tools, learning different parts of the methodologies. My email address is here. My cell phone number is also listed. I give my cell phone number out to all of my students. If you have questions, or comments, please do not hesitate to email me, text me, call me. I will answer you. I may not answer you immediately because, again, myself and my colleagues are doing project work, teaching pretty much every day. So, but I will, and my colleagues will get back to you, as quickly as possible. So, what are some of my credentials that really help me to pass knowledge on to you? I've had over 17 years operational experience in disciplines like manufacturing, distribution, processing, finance, retail sales, insurance, healthcare, lots of healthcare industries, different disciplines of IT. Worked with many nonprofits, local and state governments. So, I and my colleagues have really, we've been to a lot of places. We've seen a lot of things. We've seen different cultures. We've seen different processes, and we've seen many implementations. We've seen them fail. We've seen many succeed. And why that's important is because we understand what that equation is to a successful implementation, to successfully progressing on that journey to get different certifications in Lean and Six Sigma. We know how to make you and your organization succeed. I personally have instructed over 500 plus change agents across multiple disciplines. Most of those disciplines you see above. Led over 15 implementations in different disciplines, manufacturing, finance, healthcare, IT, even federal governments. Led and mentored over 80 Six Sigma industrial and transactional projects. So, these are specifically Six Sigma type projects that are more focused on using quantitative analysis, statistical analysis to understand what those key inputs are. Facilitate over 110 Kaizen and workout projects for many different industries. And in the Kaizen projects, we're really focused more on reducing that complexity. So again, I've been a lot of places, seen a lot of things. I kind of compare my life to that show on Discovery, How It's Made. Let's delve more into the FMEA, the failure modes effects analysis. You'll see here that we're specifically talking about what's called the PFMEA, or process FMEA. And this is the FMEA that is used within the Six Sigma DMAIC process: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. This is really this FMEA is really a reactive tool that really morphs into a proactive tool, and we'll talk about how that morphing happens. The PFMEA is, in a sense, a risk management tool. It's to manage the risk of a certain effect from a failure mode. So again, we'll talk about each of these terms as we go through this webinar. So what does an FMEA look like? Well, here you see actually the first 2/3 of an FMEA, all the way up to the last column called the RPN, or the risk priority number. So you'll see that there are different columns here: process, step, and input, potential failure mode, potential failure effect, severity, potential causes, occurrence, current controls, detection, and then the RPN. So this is the tool that we use during the analyze phase of DMAIC. So we can analyze, what's really going wrong. What are our key inputs? What's really going wrong with those key inputs? And this helps us to understand, at a detailed level, how do our key inputs that we have determined in the C&E matrix, how did those key inputs, how did they fail? What are the many ways they can fail? Not only how can they fail, but how have they failed? Right? And that's that's a key concept right there. Not only how have they failed, but how can they fail? So that actually turns the FMEA from a reactive tool by looking at only how have they failed, but it changes it to looking at being a proactive tool by saying, how can these inputs fail? They may not have failed that way, but there's a potential for them to fail in a certain scenario. Now, if you take the previous slide and you attach those rows to this last third of the FMEA, you'll get the full FMEA. So this is actually kind of broken up. I've broken up the FMEA into the first 2/3 and the last third. All right. So this is when we've actually determined what our highest risk for an effect is, and now we're going to go and say, how do we mitigate that risk? What can we do to keep that risk from having as much of an effect as it does or it could have? Now let's talk about the 10 steps to an FMEA. The first step is to review and label your process steps using your process map. Now this process map is really kind of twofold. The process map can come from the SIPOC, and you'll actually kind of see what a SIPOC looks like here. Supplier input, process output, and customer. So that'll give you a start. Now, we could also use the process map, the input map, and the kind of the rudimentary flow chart. All right, and those can give you your process steps. Now, along with your process steps, you also want to list the inputs. Okay, so both of those go into this column, the step and the input. Now, a process step could have many inputs. So I may have process step 1, input A, process step 1, input B, process step 1, input B, or I'm sorry, C. And those all go in different cells. Now, let's move on to considering the potential failure modes of each of those steps and inputs. All right, considering the potential failure modes. A potential failure mode really represents any manner in which the component or process step could fail to perform its intended function or functions. All right, so if I am creating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and in my C&E matrix, I determine that one of my key inputs is setting up to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and one of those key inputs or key steps is set up. The key input is having the work instructions, having the right work instruction. Or I'm sorry, is the input is just work instructions. Now I determine how could that input work instructions, how could it fail? Okay, now it could fail many ways. It could fail a number of ways. My work instruction could be an earlier revision, so it wasn't changed when the process was updated. So there's new ways of doing the process, although it's not represented in the work instruction. I might have an illegible work instruction because it's got material on it, that's kind of made it hard to see. I may not and that's another failure mode. Another failure mode might be that I just don't have it. Somebody lost it. All right. Another failure mode might be that I've got a damaged work instruction. All right, where I can't see certain words. So for each input could have potentially a lot of failure modes, a lot of different ways it could fail. All right, so that's a one-to-many relationship. Each input could have many potential failure modes. This is the column in which you put your potential failure mode. So again, we back up to the process step and the input. Again, one step could have many inputs. So I could have step 1. In this case, let's take it back to the scenario. I could have the step being set up, and the input is the work instructions. I could have another input to step that could be again, setup, and it could be construction of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right, and those each go in different cells or different rows. Then I move to that potential failure mode, and I say again, that step of setup, the input being the work instruction. How can work instruction, how can that input fail? Excuse me. And there could be many different failure modes. For each failure mode, I could have many different failure effects. So if I have 4 different failure modes, each of those could have multiple failure effects. So let's say that one of my failure modes is that I have a work instruction that's not legible. Okay, what are the different potential failure effects that come from that? How does that affect the process? All right, that could affect the process in the fact that I may put too much peanut butter because I can't really see what the measurement is for the peanut butter. I could put too much jelly. That's another potential failure effect. Or I can put too little jelly, too little peanut butter. So just right there, those are 4 potential failure effects. All right. So if I have 4 failure modes, and each one of those have 4 failure effects, then I've actually filled in 16 rows of data. So you can see how this can grow and get very large very quickly. The potential failure effect is really related directly to the ability of the specific component to perform its intended function. All right, these effects should really be stated in meaningful terms, that are meaningful to the product or system performance. So, you want to be as specific as possible. The more general you are in listing these effects, the harder it will be to understand what the true nature of that effect is. All right, and that's really where I see a lot of my students and my colleagues see a lot of my students start to fail, is not really defining this specific effect. Be very, very specific. Here's where the potential failure effects go under this column. And again, if I've got 4 potential failure modes for an input, and each of those failure modes have 4 potential failure effects, then I've actually filled in 16 rows of data. Next, we fill in a severity ranking. Actually, I'm going to back off of that. This is kind of put in the wrong format, because the 3 scores that I'm going to give you, severity, occurrence, and detection, these scores help us to understand what the true risk of the effect is. These 3 scores actually do not get filled in until the end of your FMEA. So once I've determined all of my potential failure modes for all of my inputs, all of my failure effects, all of my potential causes, and my current controls, after all of those have been filled in, then I go back and I fill in my scores. The reason being is if you fill in the scores as you fill in these different elements, you have the potential to skew those scores. So if you fill them in last, your focus is really going to be on the score, so that there's more of a consistency as you're filling out this FMEA. So, but I'm gonna go through this webinar in the format that the slides are in. So, assign a severity ranking. Once you fill in all the other elements, again, input, failure modes, failure effects, causes, and current controls, then we come back and we fill in that severity ranking. All right, and that severity ranking is related to the effect, the potential failure effect. So if my failure effect repeats multiple times because there are several causes for that one effect, and we'll talk about this, then my severity ranking is going to repeat. So the severity ranking is really an estimate of how serious an effect would be should it occur. All right. Again, severity ranking is an estimate of how serious a potential effect would be should it occur, and that comes from that potential failure effect column, which is to the left of that severity. Now, severity ranking is really based on, in most cases, a 1 to 10 scale. Some people do 1 to 5 scale, but I tend to think there's a little more granularity in a 1 to 10 scale. The number 1 meaning has very little effect, little or no effect. The potential failure effect doesn't really affect our process much. A 10 says it really has a large effect. And when you are dealing with processes that have a component of safety in them, and a lot of times this happens in industrial environments. 9 and 10, at severity of 9 or 10, are really used just for safety issues. A 10 means somebody could get disabled or even killed. All right, a 9, a little less than that, but still has a high severity. So this is where that severity goes under this column. This is where that severity goes. Now, I'm going to give you access to an article which has everything that we're teaching you today in this webinar in that article, written out in that article. It also gives you different severity scales that tells you, just based on a generic definition, what a 10 is, what a 9 is, what an 8 is, what a 3, what a 2, what a 1 is. And these are very generic scales. And I tell, as we implement in organizations, we turn those very generic scales into that company's wording, that company's verbiage, so that as they're using this FMEA, they know exactly what that rating is, because it talks directly to their discipline, what their company does. And that's very important when you have an FMEA to define those scales in specifically your discipline. And here is that sample severity scale. So you'll see a ranking of 10. It says under the description, may endanger the consumer. It could cause a very bad safety issue. And in general terms, it says the failure will occur without warning. So the failure occurs, and we don't know it, we don't see it. And again, it might be a safety issue to where something could hurt us because we don't see it coming. All the way down to a 1, which is no effect. So you are free to copy and use this sample severity scale for yourself. Next, we talk about the occurrence ranking. Okay, again, I said the scoring mechanism for the FMEA is severity, occurrence, and detection. Occurrence is another one of that scoring mechanism. So the occurrence ranking is actually something that we might have data to support. Right? It tells us, how many times did this nonconformance or this defect happen? All right, and so we might go back and look in our many different systems to find out, what was the likelihood, or what was the actual the amount of times this happened over a certain time or a certain number of defects. So a severity occurrence of, an occurrence ranking of 1 means, this very seldom, if ever, happens. A occurrence ranking of 10 means that this happens constantly. It's constantly occurring. This is where the occurrence goes. This is the column in which you place the occurrence. And here is a sample occurrence scale. This occurrence scale, we can look at this in terms of the probability of failure. All right, and this is really when we don't have a lot of data. We just have tribal knowledge. So our SMEs out on the floor, our subject matter experts, our operators, experienced operators, tell us that, hey, this happens, very often. All right, and we might even be able to get just some guesstimates of numbers from them that we can then correlate to possible failure rates to understand, which of these probabilities do we use. We might actually have failure rates. We might have actual data in some system that gives us a rate of failure of that process input. And then in another column we have what's called CPK. CPK is a statistical indices that really talks about the capability of a process to meet requirements, to meet specifications, to not not become a defect. All right, and this is the most reliable column to use, the most reliable solution to use, although a lot of companies don't really use nor understand this. If you go through our green belt class, our black belt class, master black belt, etc., this term, this tool will become part of your tool belt. You will understand this intimately, and this will help you to greatly understand better the performance of not only your inputs but of your outputs. The third ranking is the detection ranking. Now this can be somewhat counterintuitive because a detection of 10 actually means that you can't detect you can't detect the failure mode. You don't have any controls in place for you to be able to detect the failure mode. And again, that's kind of counterintuitive because you think a detection of 10 is a good thing. 10 is a high detection. When again, it's the least detection. A detection of 1 means that either we prevent the failure mode from happening, or we have some kind of a tool called a poke-yoke or mistake proofing process to mitigate the effect of that failure mode to where it has no effect. So to assign this ranking, really you have to identify the process or product related controls in place for each failure mode. So this really goes back to the current controls we have in place. All right, and those current controls could be, we have SOPs, standard operating procedures. We have work instructions. We have mistake proofing devices put in place. And I go into a lot of places where, in the current controls, there's a lot of stuff put in there. There's work instructions, there's SOPs, but the detection ranking is 5 to a 10, which means that those current controls, they're not working, that they have no effect, and that's very, very important to understand. We develop these controls, but if we develop them but the failure mode still happens, and it happens quite often, then we've developed the wrong kind of failure modes. We've developed the wrong kind of training. It's funny, I go into a lot of places that I ask, okay, what are the controls in place to keep this failure mode from happening? And they say, well, we've trained our people. And then I find out, that the failure mode still really is hard to detect. It gets all the way out to the customer in most cases. And I say, well, if they're trained, how does that happen? Well, you go back and look at their training and find out that it's really cultural training. It's Johnny, who has spent 20 years in this process, spends 2 hours training Jimmy, and Jimmy is expected to retain 20 years of knowledge in that 2-hour training. And when Johnny walks away, he looks at Jimmy and he says, do you understand? And a lot of times there is a sign off that he has to sign off, saying that, hey, I understand, I'm good, I can go, I'm good to go in this process. But Jimmy really has no choice but to do that, because Jimmy wants a job. And if he doesn't sign that, then he's kind of rocking the boat, and people are going to look at him funny. So Jimmy just listens to this 20 years of knowledge, doesn't pick up very many things, if anything, signs the agreement at the end, and then goes into the process and really has to learn how to survive in the process while a lot of mistakes are happening. So again, the detection ranking is really correlated to what controls we have, and do those controls work. In a lot of instances, you're going to find out that there is no control, and that's a red flag. That's a red flag that, hey, we need to do something about that. The detection ranking goes here in this column, and you'll see that the detection ranking is related directly to the current controls, which is to the left of that detection ranking. Here is a sample detection scale, pretty straightforward. So a detection ranking of 1 says that our current controls are almost certain to detect the failure mode. All right, so we have really reliable detection controls, and they detect those failure modes. And it could also mean that we actually have systems put in place to keep the defect from happening. We have pokeyokes in place to keep the defect from happening. All right, all the way up to a detection ranking of 10, which says that really there's no known controls available to detect a failure mode. What that means is this gets all the way up to the customer. Now that customer could be the next process step in our system, or it could mean the end customer. Finally, we calculate the risk priority number. This risk priority number is calculated by taking that severity, multiplying it times occurrence, multiplied times detection. So the 3 of those multiplied give you that RPN. RPN again is risk priority number. So once we determine the risk priority numbers, we can then sort on those risk priority numbers to help us understand what are our greatest risks to our process. And that really helps us to understand what to do next and what to improve. So this really is the end of the analyze phase when it comes to the qualitative analysis. All right, when it comes to the qualitative analysis. In Six Sigma, we're also going to use qualitative analysis. We're going to use multivariate testing, hypothesis testing, statistical analysis to understand, where's the data going to lead us to when it comes to these significant inputs that really affect the output. And a good flag for us is to see, in most cases, the inputs that are identified through quantitative analysis are going to have a lot of carryover, a lot of correlation to what we determine in our qualitative analysis in this FMEA. So again, this ends our analysis phase when it comes to that qualitative analysis. Now we can move into, let me back up. The RPN is actually going to populate in this column. So now once we move into the improve phase, now we can start to understand, okay, what do we need to improve? And that's going to be that RPN score, the highest to the lowest. So we're going to sort that RPN score descending to understand what are those risks that we really need to focus on. What do we need to improve? And so now we're going to develop an action plan. So we're going to take action by reducing those RPNs. And that comes in the last third of this FMEA, which are the actions that we recommend. Now, usually I don't fill in these columns necessarily because these are very short, very minute cells. What I do is I reference an action plan, a Gantt chart, a project management plan of all the things we recommend, all the things that are going to take place for us to improve the process, and who's responsible for those different activities and milestones. All right. Once we get through and we go from the improve stage into the control stage, we can then come back to this FMEA and fill in what actions did we actually take. All right. So this kind of helps us correlate the actions that we first determined to what action did we actually put in place. So that helps us to understand what truly was improved in the process. Okay, and then you see the severity, occurrence, and detection scores along with an RPN again. This is called the revised RPN. So if we take actions on our most significant risks, and those actions had some effect, then we should be able to see the effect in these next in this revised RPN. So basically, we go back and we revisit that process. After that process has had some time to germinate, we go back and we write in the scores for the revised RPN. And if our previous score, was 600, so a pretty high score, we would hope that by putting in these improvements that our severity, occurrence, and detection rankings should go down. The risk, the total number of the risks should reduce significantly. And what the great thing about this revised RPN is, what you might find out by going through this revised RPN is, I didn't reduce the risk of this effect happening enough. I need to go back and revisit it. I need to then refocus on that effect to then lower the severity, lower the occurrence, lower the detection even more, because it's still not under really what my cap is, what my lowest score should be. And again, in different companies, that's a different score. So that helps us to really understand how we made an effect. So again, we're taking action. All right, and this is where the actions take and go. And then we recalculate the resulting RPN. All right, the revised RPN, and that goes here. And again, that end score, that end RPN, what we call the revised RPN, should show you that you've had some effect. we write many articles about the different methodologies in both Lean and Six Sigma. We write articles about how to use different statistical analytical tools, and all of these articles we put up on our website for you to have immediate access to anytime. So if you go to our website, www.sixsigmadsi.com, and you look up in the right hand corner, you'll see the word blog. You click on that word blog, and that will take you to all the many articles that we have produced that give you a lot of information about both Lean and Six Sigma. One of the blogs that we've written is called How to Complete the FMEA, or the Failure Modes and Effects Analysis. In this blog, we've actually, or this article, we've actually put on paper pretty much everything we've talked about in the class, in this webinar. Not only that, but we've given you access to the root cause analysis tool set to download that and use that, and use that any way you see fit. So I do want to make a disclaimer that these webinars are really to give you kind of a high level understanding of this tool as it is used in Lean and Six Sigma, and how it synergizes with these with this tool set, this Six Sigma root cause analysis tool set. All right, these tool sets, we actually spend a lot of time in our class really understanding how these tool sets work in a synergy with the complete DMAIC methodology. So to go and use these tools now to solve a problem, I wouldn't suggest that. Really what this is for is really to kind of engage your thirst for knowledge, and say, you know what, I really want to learn more about this, and sign up for one of our classes and get that credential, that green belt credential, that black belt credential, because when you do, you'll understand how to use these at an intimate level to be able to really tackle an opportunity, both from a qualitative tool set standpoint and a quantitative statistical standpoint, and a lean standpoint as well. What did we learn today? What new knowledge did we gain today? Well, we first started out by giving you a little background on myself. Again, Kevin Clay, the one of the principals in this organization, Six Sigma Development Solutions. Our company, again, is a global company. We see ourselves as mentors. We see ourselves as teachers, and we find that by gaining relationships with the people that go on and look at our free webinars, our free blogs, that those people see that we know what we're talking about. They see that, you know, we do have knowledge. By going to the webinars, you get to see, you know, that we actually can engage you and teach you through stories, through analogies, through scenarios, so that at the end of the day in our class, you're engaged that whole day. You're thirsty for more knowledge, because I've been in many classes where you go in the class and it's very monotonous, very boring. And our classes are not that. They're very full of games, simulations, interaction. So we talked, we gave you kind of a brief introduction to the failure modes and effects analysis. A very, very, very powerful tool. Used in very large organizations, but some organizations don't really follow these four tools in this tool set, being the SciPot, the input map, the CNE matrix, and the FMEA. All of these tools, we have the individual webinars on our YouTube channel that can give you more detail on how to use these tools. So we showed you how to fill out this FMEA, again at a very high level, and how it's used in the Six Sigma root cause analysis. Now I know that this pre-recorded webinar is you don't have the chance to interact with me on the fly. So what I would like you to do is, if you have any questions about anything that we went over here today, please email me, call me, text me, and I will answer those questions. I may not answer them immediately because myself and my colleagues are teaching or doing project work every day, but I will get back to you. And I will answer those questions. Again, our company prides itself on building relationships. So what I'd like to do now is really work with you to build a strategy. Most people that are new in this methodology, or even have started the journey, really don't have a strategy because they don't know that, you don't know what you don't know, right? Myself and my colleagues, we spent many years in these methodologies. We've seen what makes companies and what makes individuals succeed, and we have helped thousands of people develop that strategy, develop that plan to progress them in their career and in their organization. So we would like to do that for you. It all starts with a conversation. We would like to schedule a call with you to really help you to develop your strategy, for progressing your career, for transforming your company, transforming yourself personally and professionally with these methodologies. So again, we would like to schedule a conversation with you, and we're going to ask certain questions like, what are your individual Lean and Six Sigma goals? What are your career goals when it comes to these this continuous improvement journey that you want to take? What are your career goals, and how can getting certified, how can being viable with these two methodologies really help you to progress your career goals? What certifications do you have presently? And we would like to help you to educate yourself on what these certifications are and what they could mean to you and to your company. Now, getting these certifications can actually you can get somewhat blockaded if your company doesn't really see or value Lean and Six Sigma. And most companies don't really not value it. They're just not educated. So help us to understand, does your company currently support Lean and Six Sigma? The more that they're educated and they support, and possibly, use this as a tool to promote continuous improvement within their organization, you can help. You can be part of the catalyst to make that happen, and this will help you propel yourself through that company. It would be great to be on that grassroots level of helping your company to use these methodologies to transform. So again, how can we help you reach your goals? Give me a call at you see the phone number here and my email address. Give me a call, text me, email me, and let's schedule a 30-minute conversation about how we can help you devise a strategy to help you achieve your career goals, and how we can be a part of that. How we can help to mentor you to greater heights. So again, give me a call, text me, email me, and we'll set up that conversation. So I hope that you leave this webinar with a little more education than you came into it with. We also have many other educational webinars, free webinars, on our YouTube channel. Please take a look at that, and we would love to have you in other webinars. We also have live webinars So you can go to our website to find those webinars. And the benefit of the live webinar is the ability to interact with myself or my colleagues to kind of ask those questions on the fly. So again, I had a great time teaching this webinar, and I hope to see you. I hope to converse with you, hope to have the conversation with you in the future. Have a great day.